They're so close, this Buffalo Sabres team, to being not just, they're not rebuilding anymore, but to being playoff bound and competitive. Where do you think they should be at in terms of actually adding? Like, I don't think anyone thinks they can win the cup here, but like, should they add to give these guys some playoff experience, give the fans some excitement?
Well, I mean, listen, playoff experience, they got to make the playoffs. There's so many teams. I'm not counting them out. That's for sure. And I think that's the question for Kevin Adams is, would we trade, a draft pick or some youth to get, to bring that player in or a couple? I think that's a tough decision because you don't want to give away the future either, to bring in the right guy. But maybe somebody on an expiring contract that could actually, want to be competitive, possibly sign a contract in Buffalo that they would love. That would be a great guy. That's an older player, I would assume, and somebody who's probably not at the top of their game. So does that player make a difference, trying to chase the playoffs? You could definitely tell, though, the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Buffalo Sabres are at two different levels. And last night was pretty indicative of that.
Hey, Mayday, you came close a couple times with some very good teams in Buffalo, but you did experience a Stanley Cup championship in Anaheim, and that came off the backs of course, Timu, Scott Niedermayer, Getzlav, Perry. What is it that Ryan OReilly brings the Toronto Maple Leafs that has been missing so far?
Well, I think, first of all, Nola Chari is going to be a big part of that deal. So he's been kind of forgotten in this whole thing. I mean, he's already scored for Toronto. He's a solid guy. He's the type of player that everybody wanted and needs Toronto to have, right? Bottom six, gritty forward that puts pressure on the opposition. As for Ryan OReilly, it's just leadership. He's won the Selke. He's got, behind Pavel Datsyuk, he might be one of the best, in Patrice Bergeron, of course. He's one of the best defensive forwards. And he's so legit that face-offs and the way he plays responsibly, that's a huge help. So if he's in the top six, he might even be in your next line, your third line role. And, boy, if he's your third-line center and he can shut down the likes of a, Kucherov and a Stamkos or a Marchand or Bergeron and go head-to-head, all of a sudden Toronto looks pretty solid, right? I mean, if they're able to draw penalties and get that potent power play on the ice.
I mean, how do you feel about loading up the elite guys up top versus spreading it out throughout the lineup in playoffs? We had Ken Hitchcock on who said that in the playoffs, the top two lines tend to saw off. Who's going to score in your bottom six? But obviously the top guys looked really good as a unit last night. Where do you stand on the best method for getting through in the postseason?
Thanks for the question. I think I just said it in some way. Ryan OReilly, maybe he's your Swiss Army knife, right? He can play in the top lines. Obviously, he's proven that, and he's been a heck of a player. But he's a guy that can shut down. You give him that role, and he's going to relish it. He wants to win a Stanley Cup, and he wants to do well here in Toronto. There's a lot of pressure, and he feels it. But he's been there before. He got traded from the Buffalo Sabres to St. Louis. They're the worst team in the league. January the 4th, if I'm not mistaken, the year they won the Stanley Cup. He goes on to win the Conn Smythe, and he was outstanding. And he had great chemistry with David Perron and his line mates. But Ryan OReilly, I like this move. If he's your third-line centerman, that's exactly what to answer that question. He's the guy that's going to saw off the better players on the other side. Now, all of a sudden, he's going to be able to possibly pitch in offensively. And again, if he's your third-line centerman, if that's where it ends up, you got a really deep team.
We're talking to Brad May, former NHLer, Stanley Cup champion. Mayday, is the depth now up front enough to maybe cover up a little bit of maybe some deficiencies on the back end and what may come down to inexperienced playoff goaltender?
Here's the thing: are we going to be optimistic, or are we pessimistic, or are we?
You listen to our show.
Are we the woe is me? Here we go again group. I just don't know. I think it feels differently for me watching the Toronto Maple Leafs. Yes, they still aren't the best defensive club. I'd love to see, a couple players added that really their mandate, and they'd be so proud and excited to get out there and shut people down. you get that mentality on the bottom six. They all can skate. It's just a commitment, right? And yeah, you need that whole defensive unit, all 5 players playing solid. But you don't have to hit home runs all the time. Get the puck out of your zone. Let the big boys, let the top 2 lines, if that's the case, let them run and gun. But the bottom half of your lineup has to be incredibly sound and willing to do whatever it takes. And you know what, Ryan OReilly, I don't want to put the cap on him, but he's earned it. He's a great player, and he's aging, but I think he's going to make a difference. And we've seen it already. But again, I like the Noel Acciari. When that trade was made, in my thoughts of the Toronto Maple Leafs, Noel Acciari might make a bigger impact at the end of the day than Ryan OReilly, which might be crazy.
Yeah.